helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, certified Christian counselor and director of Ottawa's Elim Counseling Services.
Hi, this is Michael Hart of Elim Counseling Services, and I want to thank you for joining us today on this episode of the Life Transformation Radio Show. As usual, we have another interesting show lined up for you. Today's show will be the second part in the series on overcoming codependency. So we'll be continuing from where we left off last week. But before we go into the show, let me give out my contact information again, just in case you're a first-time listener. And if you're a first-time listener, thank you very much for joining us today. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, and counseling, as it's spelled in our website address, is spelled with 2 L's. So the website is elimcounselingministry.com. If you just put Elim Counseling, you should be able to find us. Also, elimcounseling.com, which should work as well. Our telephone is 613-699-1677. And if you're not familiar with us, we have male and female therapists who are able to help you with a wide range of issues, from couple and marital problems to mental health challenges. And we're trained in many different disciplines of psychotherapy. We have therapists who are trained in EMDR. On other shows we have talked about what that is, so I won't get into that today. And we also specialize in cognitive behavior therapy. So we have psychotherapists who are very knowledgeable in those areas. And if you are able to help us by way of giving a donation, it would be well appreciated, because one of the things that differentiates us from other counseling centers is that we reach out to people who are in a position that they can't afford to pay the going rate for counseling. So we have people who are on ODSP, for example, whose counseling is not covered by the program that they're in, but they still need help, and we have a heart for helping those people. So we are able to do that and continue in business by the generous donations that are made to our ministry from time to time. So please, if you haven't donated as yet, please consider making a donation to us. Donation also help us to stay in the air and also able to continue to offer these kind of teaching in so that we can be of help to a wide cross section of people who might not make it in to our counseling office.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, Michael, we really, through some of the work we do, are trying to reach that wide cross section, because we've come to recognize that mental health issues and just life issues affect everyone, no matter what circle of life you find yourself in. And we've talked about it as well as when you get talking to people, everyone has something.
Yes.
And it's trying to figure out how you can deal with your personal stuff, and as you interact with other people dealing with their stuff.
Yes.
And so it's something that we all sort of go through in life and our interactions, and it's not something to run away from, shy away from. It's something that you can overcome. And we really encourage people to reach out and to seek help if they feel they need it. And if they never make it into an office, listen to our show, because hopefully there's some practical tips you'll find as we discuss a wide variety of topics each week on the air. And this week, as you said, Michael, I'm really excited. I must say, I loved part 1. I had people in my head that I was like, you need to listen to part 1. And it's because we're talking about codependency. And it's something, as we talked about in last show, happens to many people, but it comes up in a lot of spiritual circles.
Absolutely.
Because we're helpers.
Yeah, and as last week, as I talked about Moses and his father-in-law coming to him, I can kind of see myself being one of those leaders that would be saying to my father-in-law, excuse me, this is my business. I am the one who hears from God, not you. And how dare you tell me that I am to do differently than what I am doing. You're stepping out of your place here. You're messing with my life and with God's plan. Do you know who I am? Jethro, I am Moses. Okay, I could just see myself being tempted to address it in that way. So when we talk about this show, I'm not just pointing the fingers at other people.
No,
we're helping ourselves here, Melissa.
Exactly. And when we encourage you to self-reflect, that we're also encouraging ourselves. So please know, We by no means want you to feel like we're standing on some pedestal and pointing out issues, because often we're looking at the log in our own eye as we go through that. Yeah. And there are some things that touch a little close to home, but that's okay. That's okay. It's all part of the journey and figuring yourself out. So we wanted to continue talking about codependency, and I wanted to touch or sort of dive right into a topic we left off on in last show, and that was some of the communication patterns that come through in a codependent individual. So if you wouldn't mind just starting to dig right into that, Michael, I think it'd be a great place for us to start this week in our topic of codependency.
Yes, I think one of the things that we didn't touch on last week that I think is very, very important is that people who are codependent, they often say yes when they mean no. And then they will go and complain to others that, this person is taking up so much of my time. But then when you begin to examine what they're doing for others, you realize that they're saying that they're not being forced by these other people. They're freely and willingly giving up their time, and then complaining that this person, blaming the person who is getting the help for the help that they're giving. And so they complain behind the person's back, or they make the person to some kind of a monster for making them, drive the children to school and pay their bills and living their house
they're
free. They're taking advantage of me. They're living with me in my house, and they haven't volunteered to pay any rent, and it's a lot of blame of the other person. But a lot of time when you look at it, you realize that they have been asked, if the person, they were asked by the person, can I live with you? And they say yes. They were asked by the person, can you drive my kids to school in the mornings? And they said yes. They're saying yes, yes, yes. But they often mean no. Codependent people, when it comes to communication, they have a hard time standing up for themselves. So if there's a situation in which there is a conflict, instead of being direct and instead of speaking about how they feel in the middle of the conflict, they often internalize it, and they will continue to engage in what Sigmund Freud called a reaction formation. Reaction formation is a self-defense mechanism. I think it was Anna Freud that coined that term, where in reaction formation, what happened is that people do the opposite for others than what they feel. So for an example of that would be a client who is giving money to his wife and their new lover. Instead, when in reality, what they really are feeling, what they're feeling is anger and frustration and powerlessness. So the giving is a reaction that comes out of a place of powerlessness. So reaction formation is when people do the opposite of what they really feel. Now, last week we talked about this masquerading as spirituality, because we can look at that and we can say, wow, this person has such a generous heart and they're so forgiving, because they could be bitter at their their wife or their ex-wife and the new boyfriend, but they're just paying they're paying their rent, and isn't that so wonderful?
They're showing so much grace.
They're showing so much grace, but behind that is the dysfunction, where they're not doing this because they have forgiving. They're still very hurt. They're still very angry. But there is this feeling of powerlessness that they have, where they keep giving and being taken advantage of. And then beneath that is a lot of resentment and anger that is building up. They're just on the surface seeking to do these generous acts.
And as you say, it really is the opposite of the true feelings, because you want to stab their eyes out with a pencil, but you're exhibiting this loving behavior. It also, for me, echoes to a topic that we've talked about in the past about boundaries. Do these people tend to have weak boundaries where they're saying yes, they really mean no? Is it a boundary issue that's going on here?
Right, because people who are codependent on others, where, for example, a person who, let's take the example of a son who is addicted to drugs, and you know that the money that you give to this person is being used to buy drugs. So the parent will say something to the effect of, I realize that he is taking advantage of me, and I'm not going to give any more money to sustain his drug habit. But then the situation comes up in the future where they're asked for money again, and they don't have the necessary intestinal fortitude to say, no, I am not giving you, either because of desiring the love of the son, or feeling that if I say no, this person is going to withdraw their love from me. They're going to be angry, and I just can't tolerate that. So even though they know that they should be saying no, and that they have been told by others that by not putting that boundary in place where you stop giving financial resources to someone who is an addict, they keep saying yes, and they because they can't stand up, they can't draw that line where they say no means no. So they say yes, and they continue to let people hurt them. So they keep going through this cycle over and over and over again.
And do you ever find that people then snap? Like one day they just get pushed too far, and maybe they didn't set that boundary early on, and then suddenly the lid on the whole thing gets popped off, and then they explode? Or
Absolutely. So sometimes we see it results. We talked about that triangle between the victim, the rescuer, and then either the victim or the rescuer becoming the persecutor. So this is when we see anger, when the rescuer is normally the codependent person who becomes really angry at the other person. We find that this is the persecution time. They're turning all of their anger and their frustration for how they have allowed themselves to be walked over time and time again. It's now being expressed as anger.
So what other areas in our personal life would you see codependency exhibited by people?
Well, I think codependency is reflected in a number of different areas. It is reflected in the spiritual area as well. A lot of people who are codependent can have this feeling that they're losing faith in God. They're trying and they're working so hard to help this person, to control the behavior of another person, to rescue this other person. And the more they pour in their resources, the more they pray, it's the more they see this person continuing in a drug habit or just living a dysfunctional life. And to give the example of trying to help someone to find a job, and the person not turning up for the job after you have invested so much effort in getting the interview for them. A lot of time these people can become angry at God and feel that God has abandoned them, or that they can lose their faith and their trust because they become burnt out of trying to rescue others. So I think it's important to be able to strike balance in your life, as Jesus did, in that we are told that he would often take that time away from the business to seek God's face and to pray. Compare that to the example of Moses that we talked about, where he was from morning till evening ministering to the people and not having that time apart, to the point where it became concerning to his father-in-law, that his father-in-law had to say, "What are you doing? It is not good."
Mm-hmm. One other area that you highlighted for me in my notes here as an area where sometimes we see codependency is actually in the bedroom. And so we're not trying to make a big turd in this show here. So keep it PG there, Michael. But how is codependency exhibited in the bedrooms?
Okay, so people who are codependent, as I said before, they often have a hard time saying no. So they will often engage in sexual activities when they don't want to. They will do things that they don't want to do, and then build a lot of resentment and a lot of pain and a lot of hurt as a result of that. And a lot of time too, when they are engaging in these activities, it's out of their own dysfunction where they're feeling, I have to do this to be loved. I have to say yes to be loved because I just can't tolerate my partner being upset or being angry at me. So people give in to these sexual requests in the bedroom, and then they're really dying inside.
And so that, as we've talked about, there's a lot of areas we can become codependent in our life, whether it's in the bedroom, in the church, in our office life, in whatever relationships we find ourselves in. Are there dangers to codependency?
Absolutely. So just let me say, one of the danger there when we talk about in the bedroom, for example, where a person is saying yes all the time when they actually mean no, and they're doing things that they don't really want to do because they cannot stand up for themselves. They're seeking so much to be loved that they just can't put that boundary in place where they say, I'm not going to indulge in this. There are other things that we can do, but this doesn't work for me. What eventually happened, one of the danger of that is that it gets to a point where they end up having the feeling sexual revulsion towards their partner, where they at some point they just want to withdraw totally. And it becomes a shock to the partner because it's like the other partner had no idea that these things was a bother to this person. So instead of speaking up and saying, no, this doesn't work, or it can be a simple thing as speaking up for their own needs. It's kind of sad to see how many people have gone through a 10-year relationship, a 20-year relationship, and they'll come in my office and saying, for 20 years, we have been making love this way, and it doesn't work for me, but I didn't have the courage to stand up to my partner and to say, this is what I like, this is what I wanted, because I feel that if I were to say that, he or she would get angry. And so I just went along and pretended. And now it's at the point where I am feeling so much repulsion from this person that I can't even stand the thought of being touched anymore. So this is when you know that the relationship is into serious trouble, and they have to start doing intense therapy to get over years and years of acting that sort of a passive way in the sexual relationship. So codependent partners are usually very passive in the sexual relationship, and as I said before, it leads to dysfunction. One of the other dangers of that kind of relationship is these people can sometimes get involved in extramarital affair, and you can see how this would happen even to very good Christians. Because if you're in a situation where you're not feeling satisfied day in, day out, and this is continuing for years, oftentimes these people become vulnerable because they just don't know how to express and to talk about what is it that they really need. So instead of talking about it, they engage in activities in other relationship or using pornography or other ways to satisfy their sexual needs. So if you've just joined us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio Show. I'm your host, Michael Hart of Elam Counselling Services, and today we're talking about overcoming codependency. And with me in studio today, as usual, is Melissa Waggett, and we have been exploring codependency. This is the second part of the series in a number of different areas of life. If you have missed the first part, then you can go to our website at elamcounselingministry.com to listen to the first part. Elam is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, elamcounselingministry.com. You can also call us at 613-699-1677 or interact with us on our Facebook page or Twitter page by accessing those page on our website. And again, thank you very much for joining us today.
And so as we've described, there's a lot of different situations that become codependent. But how do we get to that place of codependency? What causes people to move from these healthy caretaking type activities to becoming codependent in whatever area of life that they may find themselves?
I think codependency in people who are codependent in their relationship, it started in their childhood. There are things that have precipitated this in their childhood experiences. So an example of that is if a person is abused as a child, physically abused, dominated by a parent, didn't have a voice, had this voicelessness where they were told that their opinion didn't matter, that they had to say yes, that they always had to have a smile on their face despite of how they felt, that they had to pretend, they had to keep the family secret. They might be dying inside, but our friends are coming over, and so now you have to put on this act of a loving family. When you come out of situation like that, you translate that into adult relationship in which you continue to act the same way, in that you act as if your feelings don't really matter. How I feel don't matter. So people who are codependent have often been victims of physical abuse, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse, abandonment. A lot of these people are from alcoholic families as well, where they have seen a lot of violence as a result of the alcoholic parent, or they have been neglected over and over by the alcoholic parent. Because what a lot of us don't realize is that when a person is involved, when a parent is involved in the use of alcohol or drugs, each time that they're stoned or each time that they're drunk, it's an abandonment to a young child, because the mom or dad that child know is not around when they're in that intoxicated state, or when they're in that under the influence of drugs. So can you imagine what that's like for a child, that you have a parent who is usually loving and involved, and then now you're trying to reach out to that parent, but that parent is not there, that parent is angry, or that parent is distant, or that parent is in a state where they can't even recognize who you are. That's a feeling of abandonment. So people who grow up in these households experience a series of abandonment that oftentimes in adult relationships makes it very, very hard for them to, number one, trust others, and they act in ways that they are seeking to have the love of others by doing and sacrificing themselves and working hard to rescue others, because because their self-esteem has been damaged as a result of these early childhood experiences.
I'm wondering too, in maybe some less traumatic terms, if people have grown up in an environment where striving and being successful and helping others before themselves is really emphasized, and that martyr kind of persona is celebrated. Mm-hmm. Could that, as you get older too, develop into this type of codependency where it's not about me, it's about them?
Yes, I think too, we have to be careful that we don't raise children who feel that they should put others first at all times. Because when the Bible says that you should love others as yourself, it did notice that it didn't say love others more than yourself.
Or in spite of yourself.
Or in spite of yourself. So it's important for us to get that balance right, because people who are codependent, what they're doing is that the way that they're seeking to love and to meet the needs of others, it often means that they're putting themselves on the back burner. So when Jesus admonishes us to love others as their self, in that statement is an implied healthy dose of self-love. So you can only truly love others when you love yourself. People who are codependent, who feel has very low self-esteem, or somehow feels that they're not lovable, they're helping out of a place of dysfunction. So when they're helping people, the scale is tipped the other way, where they're now helping in a way that they're being destructive to themselves. And eventually, like like Moses was in danger of doing, they get into a place where they're totally burnout, or they become frustrated and angry at the other person because of no fault of the other person, but because they have over exerted themselves in trying to control the life of others, trying to save others. And so it's important for us to be able to strike the right balance.
So how can people break that cycle of codependency in their life?
Well, first of all, I think it's necessary to have some self-reflection to say, what am I doing in this relationship that I am in? Start with that self-reflection. Am I helping people to the point where it's making me angry and frustrated? If you're experiencing these emotions, and not only that, but you find that you're unable to talk about it with the other person, you're unable to say how you feel, then it's a sign that you need to stop and to reconsider the kind of relationship that you're engaging in. So when we are treating people in codependency, we need to get people sometime to integrate the spiritual truths of the scripture. And one of the healthy things that we can help people to see in psychotherapy, people who have spiritual beliefs, is what is very powerful tool in helping them heal is the unconditional love of God. Is that you don't have to strive to be loved. You don't have to do anything to be loved by God. You don't have to rescue people to be loved. And in turn, you don't have to try to get this person to love you to have self-worth. You are loved unconditionally. And when people really begin to feel this at a very deep level, there is often a sigh of relief where they can now let go and begin to help in healthy ways.
And I think that's so freeing, that statement. And if people can hold on to that, those who are listening who are identifying with this, there's nothing you can do or nothing that you don't have to do that will pull you from that love of God. You just being yourself is enough.
Absolutely. And I think too, once you begin to understand that, wow, I don't have to strive to be loved, it's very, very freeing, because it helps people to get to the next stage, which is to develop healthy self-worth and respect for themselves. So when you begin to heal those childhood wounds, where people now feel that despite of what happened to me as a child, despite of the fact that I was sexually abused or physically abused, my self-worth is still intact. I am still very precious. I am still lovable. They can begin to have respect. And as people begin to have respect, they can begin to set boundaries. So then the next stage would be to restructure cognitive beliefs about relationships, rules, and boundaries. In other words, they begin to understand that they need to put boundaries in place, and that doing things for people is not going to make people love you, and that you can have healthy boundaries and still have good relationship. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of today's show, but I want to thank you so much for joining us in this episode of the Life Transformation Radio Show. I know that there is more that we could have covered in this topic.
It's a lot of material for us to cover in such a short time.
Absolutely. So we welcome your call at 613-699-1677. And until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart of Elam Counseling Services, praying that God would bless you in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.